Captain Hyun-ki stood on the bridge of the eternal dawn, watching the stars drift past the view screen. Out here at the galaxy's edge, the stars were few and far between. Most people called this place empty and worthless. That was exactly how humans liked it. "Sir, we're getting signals from the mining station on Kepler 442b, said Lieutenant Yu Jin from her station. Sung-ho reports everything is normal. Hyun-ki nodded. Sung-ho had been running the mining operation for 3 years now. His daughter Yoon-ji helped him with the equipment. They were good people, quiet people who didn't ask too many questions about why humans chose to live so far from everyone else. The truth was, something most humans tried not to think about. 300 years ago, when the aliens first made contact, humanity had been offered a place in the Great Galactic Council. They could have had worlds near the bright center of the galaxy, where trade flowed like rivers and technology advanced every day. Instead, humans had politely declined and moved out here to the rim. The aliens thought it was strange, but they didn't complain. More resources for them. "Captain," called out Navigator Bo-Ram from her post. "I'm picking up ships coming into the system. Big ones." Hyun-ki felt his stomach tighten. "How many?" 12 vessels. They look like Vorthak design. Bo-Ram's fingers moved quickly over her controls. Heavy cruisers and science ships. The Vorthak Empire was one of the largest powers in the galaxy. They were proud, aggressive, and always looking for new worlds to claim. Hyun-ki had hoped they would stay away from the rim for a few more years. "Send a message to Admiral Taeksu," Hyun-ki ordered. "Tell him we have visitors." The lead Vorthak ship was huge, easily 10 times the size of the Eternal Dawn. Its hull was covered in weapons and armor plating. When the communication channel opened, a large alien face appeared on the screen. The Vorthak looked like a cross between a lizard and a bear, with yellow eyes that seemed to look right through you. "I am Commander Zethmore of the Vorthak 4th Fleet," the alien said in a deep growling voice. "You will identify yourself, human." "Captain Hyun-ki of the Terran Defense Fleet," Hyun-ki replied calmly. "This system is claimed by humanity under the Galactic Accords." Zethmore laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "These dead worlds? You claim these worthless rocks?" "We do." "Then you will not mind if we take what we need. The planet below has good metals. We will mine them." Hyun-ki kept his voice steady. "I'm afraid that's not possible. The system is under human protection." "Protection?" Zethmore's yellow eyes narrowed. "With what? That tiny ship?" "Human. Your entire species has maybe 100 vessels. We have thousands. You are nothing." The communication ended. Through the view screen, Hyun-ki watched as the Vorthak ships moved toward Kepler 442b. They were right about human numbers. Officially, humanity had a small fleet scattered across a dozen worthless star systems. What the Vorthak didn't know was why those systems were really important. "Sir," Yujin said quietly, "Sung-ho is sending another message. The Vorthak are landing troops near his mining site." Hyun-ki closed his eyes for a moment. Deep under Kepler 442b's surface was something the galaxy could never know about. Project Prometheus was humanity's most secret research facility. For 300 years, human scientists had been working on things that would terrify other species. "Get me Admiral Taeksu," Hyun-ki said. The Admiral's face appeared on a secure channel a few minutes later. Taeksu was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been keeping humanity's secrets for 40 years. "How bad is it?" Taeksu asked. 12 ships? They're already landing on 442b. Commander Zethmore doesn't seem interested in talking. Taeksu was quiet for a long moment. "We can't let them get too close to Prometheus." "I know, sir. The Galactic Accords forbid military action without council approval. If we fight, they'll ask questions we can't answer." Hyun-ki understood. Humanity's survival depended on looking weak and harmless. If the galaxy knew what humans were really capable of, every species would unite to destroy them. "What are your orders, sir?" "Try diplomacy first, if that fails." Taeksu paused. "Do what you must to protect our secrets." The channel closed. Hyun-ki looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all young, all trained from birth to keep humanity's greatest secret. They knew that their peaceful existence at the Rim came with a terrible price. Yujin, any word from Sung-ho? He's gone silent, sir. The Vorthak have surrounded his facility. Hyun-ki felt anger building in his chest. Sung-ho and Yun-ji were good people. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of something this dangerous. Bo-ram, set course for the planet. Engine, prepare for standard approach. Sir, said Engineer Dong-hyun from the back of the bridge. Should I ready the special systems? Hyun-ki hesitated. The special systems were why humans really lived at the Rim. Technology that violated every known law of physics. Weapons that could destroy fleets without firing a shot. Defenses that made human ships nearly impossible to destroy. All of it was based on discoveries that humanity wished they had never made. Not yet, Hyun-ki said, but be ready. As the Eternal Dawn moved toward Kepler 442b, Hyun-ki hoped the Vorthak would be reasonable. He hoped they would take some metal and leave. He hoped they wouldn't dig too deep or ask too many questions. But in his heart, he knew hope wasn't enough. Some secrets were worth any price to protect, even if that price was war with the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The Vorthak ships grew larger on the view screen as they approached. Soon, Hyun-ki would have to make a choice that could change everything. The Rim had been quiet for 300 years. That quiet was about to end. The rescue mission began 3 hours after the Vorthak captured Sung-ho and his daughter. Hyun-ki watched the enemy ships through his view screen, counting their weapons and shield generators. On paper, the Eternal Dawn didn't stand a chance. Lieutenant Yujin, are you ready? Hyun-ki asked. Yujin checked her equipment one more time. The rescue gear looked normal, but like everything else on human ships, it was more than it appeared. Ready, sir. Engineer Dong-hyun, activate the quantum tunneling drive. Dong-hyun's hands moved over controls that most aliens would think were impossible. Tunneling drive online, Captain. We're now existing in 17 different dimensions at once. The Eternal Dawn began to change. To anyone watching from outside, the ship seemed to flicker like a bad hologram. One moment it was solid, the next it was transparent. The Vorthak sensors started showing impossible readings. Approaching the enemy fleet, Navigator Bo-ram reported. They're trying to scan us, but their sensors can't lock on. Hyun-ki smiled grimly. The quantum tunneling drive was one of humanity's smaller secrets. By existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, human ships could pass through solid matter like it wasn't there. Shields, armor, even weapons fire couldn't touch them while the drive was active. The cost was enormous. The drive pulled power from 17 different versions of reality, and the stress on the crew was incredible. Bo-ram's face was already pale from the neural feedback. There, Yujin pointed at one of the Vorthak ships. That's where they're holding the prisoners. Hyun-ki watched as his ship approached the enemy vessel. The Vorthak were firing everything they had, but the energy beams passed right through the Eternal Dawn like it was made of smoke. Taking us through their hull now, Dong-hyun announced. The sensation of passing through solid matter was always strange. For a moment, Hyun-ki could see the inside of the Vorthak ship around them, alien corridors and equipment filled with confused soldiers who couldn't understand why their weapons weren't working. They materialized inside the enemy ship's holding area. Alarms were screaming and Vorthak guards were running in all directions. Yujin moved quickly, her equipment scanning for human life signs. Found them. Deck 7, Section 12, the rescue took exactly 8 minutes. Sung-ho and Yun-ji were locked in a small metal room, frightened but unharmed. The Vorthak guards couldn't fight what they couldn't see or touch. Papa, what's happening? Yun-ji asked as Yujin led them back to the Eternal Dawn. Sung-ho looked at Hyun-ki with understanding in his eyes. He had worked around Project Prometheus long enough to know that humanity had secrets, big ones. Just stay close to me, Sung-ho told his daughter. They were back on the Eternal Dawn within minutes, but as they prepared to leave, Captain Grikstal of the Vorthak science vessel made a terrible mistake. He ordered his most advanced sensors to perform a deep scan of the human ship. Captain, Dong-hyun said urgently, they're scanning us with quantum resonance detectors. If they record our dimensional signature, Hyun-ki didn't need him to finish. If the Vorthak recorded proof of human technology, they would take it to the Galactic Council. Questions would be asked. Investigations would begin. Eventually, someone would discover the truth about why humans really lived at the Rim. All crew prepare for Erebus Protocol, Hyun-ki announced. The bridge crew moved quickly to secure themselves. The Erebus protocol was the most dangerous thing a human ship could do. It would completely phase them out of normal reality, making them invisible and undetectable. But the neural cost was enormous. Erebus protocol in 3, 2, 1, activating now. Reality twisted. For a moment, Hyun-Ki existed in a place between dimensions, where thoughts had weight and darkness had teeth. He could feel the vastness of the spaces between worlds, cold and hungry and waiting. The eternal dawn vanished completely from the Vorthak sensors. Every trace of the ship's presence was erased from their computers. The quantum signatures, the energy readings, even the records of the rescue mission disappeared as if they had never existed. But the cost was terrible. Navigator Boram screamed and collapsed at her station. Her mind had been caught between dimensions, lost in the spaces where human thoughts weren't meant to go. "Medical team to the bridge," Hyun-Ki shouted. Medic Tae-young arrived quickly, checking Boram's vital signs. She's alive, but her brain patterns are all wrong. It's like part of her mind is still in the other dimension. Hyun-Ki knelt beside Boram's unconscious form. She was young, barely 25, and one of the best navigators in the fleet. Now she was paying the price for humanity's secrets. On the Vorthak ships, confusion reigned. Captain Grixtel stared at his sensor displays in disbelief. According to every instrument on his ship, the human vessel had never existed. There were no records of any rescue mission, no evidence that anything unusual had happened. "Commander Zethmore," Grixtel reported over the communication channel, "we may have a problem. I'm detecting energy readings that don't match any known technology." "Explain," Zethmore growled. "The human ship. It did something impossible. For a moment it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, then it simply stopped existing entirely." Zethmore was quiet for a long moment. "That's impossible. Humans have no such technology." "Sir, I'm looking at the readings right now. This violates everything we know about physics." Back on Earth, emergency channels were buzzing with activity. President Jin-ae called an immediate meeting of the Shadow Council, humanity's secret government. The council met in a room deep underground, shielded from any possible surveillance. General Woo-sung slammed his hand on the table. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. We can't keep hiding forever. Eventually, someone will discover the truth. And when they do, they'll unite to destroy us," replied Director Haewon of Human Intelligence. "Every species in the galaxy will see us as a threat." President Jin-ae looked tired. She was only 40, but leading humanity's secret war had aged her beyond her years. "How much do the Vorthak know?" "Not much," Haewon said. "The Erebus protocol erased most of the evidence. But Captain Grixtel is smart. He'll keep investigating." "Then we need to be ready," General Woo-sung said. "If they discover our true capabilities," he didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room knew what would happen. Humanity had been hiding for 300 years because the truth was too dangerous to reveal. 3 centuries ago, human scientists had made a discovery that changed everything. They had opened a doorway to the spaces between dimensions and seen what lived there. The experience had nearly driven the entire research team insane. The things that existed between realities were ancient and hungry. They viewed ordered reality as a disease to be cured, only by sealing the doorway and developing dimensional technology to guard against future breaches. Had humanity saved their universe from destruction? Every piece of human technology since then had been based on artifacts recovered from that brief contact with the void. The quantum tunneling drives, the Erebus protocol, even the simple energy weapons used by human security forces all drew their power from dimensional manipulation. But the aliens couldn't know that. If they learned the truth about what humanity was really protecting against, panic would spread across the galaxy. Wars would break out. Civilizations would fall, and in the chaos, something might find a way to open another doorway. On the bridge of the eternal dawn, Hyun-Ki watched over Bo-ram as the medical team worked to bring her mind back from wherever it had gone. Her eyes were open, but she was looking at things that weren't there. "Captain," she whispered suddenly, her voice strange and distant. "There are things watching us from the dark between the stars. They're hungry and they're getting closer." Hyun-Ki felt ice in his veins. Sometimes, when humans used the dimensional technology, they saw glimpses of what lived in the void. Most of the time, it was just nightmares caused by neural feedback. Sometimes it was something worse. "Get some rest, Bo-ram," he said gently. "Everything is going to be fine." But as he looked out at the stars, Hyun-ki wondered if that was true. The secrets humanity guarded were getting harder to keep. And somewhere in the darkness between dimensions, ancient things were stirring. Deep beneath the surface of Kepler 442b, Dr. Nari felt the ground shake again. The Vorthak mining operations above were getting closer to Project Prometheus, and each explosion sent vibrations through the rock that made her equipment scream warnings. The dimensional anchors are showing stress fractures, reported physicist Kwang-soo, his face pale as he studied the readings. If they fail, the sealed gateway could reopen. Dr. Nari closed her eyes and tried not to think about what that would mean. 300 years ago, humanity's greatest scientist had opened a doorway to the void between realities. The things they had seen there still haunted human nightmares. The gateway had been sealed at enormous cost, and Project Prometheus had been built around it to make sure it stayed that way. "How long do we have?" she asked. "At the current rate of vibration? Maybe 6 hours before the anchors start to fail." Computer specialist Jae Wook looked up from his station. "The Vorthak have tripled their mining operations. They're using heavy excavation equipment now. They must have found something they like." What they had found were rare metals that existed only near dimensional weak points. The metals were incredibly valuable, but they were also a warning sign. Any species that understood physics should have known to stay away from them. The Vorthak either didn't know or didn't care. "Ma'am," Security Chief Mingyu said quietly, "I'm getting reports from our surface sensors. Vorthak ground troops are setting up a perimeter. They're not just mining anymore. They're preparing for a full occupation." Dr. Nari nodded grimly. She had expected this. The Vorthak were a military species. Once they claimed a world, they defended it with everything they had. "Any word from the surface facility?" she asked. "Sung-ho and his team were evacuated by Captain Hyun-ki," Mingyu reported, "but the Vorthak found their equipment. They're asking questions about why humans were mining so deep. That was the problem with maintaining a cover story. Eventually, people started noticing the inconsistencies. Sung-ho's mining operation had been going much deeper than necessary for the metals they were supposedly extracting. The Vorthak would want to know why." "Dr. Nari," biologist So Young called from across the laboratory, "I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the sealed gateway. The vibrations are causing resonance in the dimensional barriers." Dr. Nari hurried over to look at the readings. The gateway that humanity had sealed 3 centuries ago was responding to the mining operations above. The seal was holding, but barely. "If the barriers fail," So Young continued, "it won't just reopen the gateway. The resonance could create a cascade effect. Every dimensional weak point in this sector could collapse. That would be a disaster beyond imagination. The void entities that lived between realities would pour through multiple openings at once. They would consume this entire region of space before any defense could be mounted." "We need to evacuate," Dr. Nari said. "All non-essential personnel out now." But even as she gave the order, she knew it wasn't that simple. Project Prometheus wasn't just a research facility. It was a prison built around humanity's greatest mistake. The dimensional anchors that kept the gateway sealed were integrated into every system in the facility. If they abandoned Prometheus, the anchors would fail within hours. Her communication console chimed with an incoming message from the surface. It was Admiral Taiksu, his weathered face showing the strain of the situation. "Dr. Nari, what's your status?" "The mining operations are destabilizing our containment systems," she reported. "We have maybe 6 hours before the dimensional anchors fail. Can you evacuate the research data?" "Some of it. But Admiral, if we abandon the facility, the sealed gateway will reopen. We'll have much bigger problems than lost research." Taiksu was quiet for a moment. He was one of the few people who knew the full truth about what Project Prometheus really protected. "How many people do you have down there?" 47 essential personnel. The rest have already been evacuated. "Dr. Nari, I'm ordering a full evacuation. We'll find another way to maintain the containment." "There is no other way," she said firmly. "The anchors have to be manually maintained. If we leave, the seal fails. If the seal fails, those things break through." She didn't need to explain what those things were. Every human in a position of authority knew about the void entities, ancient beings of pure entropy that existed in the spaces between dimensions. They had been trying to break into ordered reality for millions of years. Humanity had accidentally given them a doorway. "Ma'am," Jae Wook said urgently, "I'm getting reports from the surface sensors. The Vorthak have brought in deep core scanners. They're mapping the entire subsurface structure. Dr. Nari felt her stomach drop. If the Vorthak discovered Project Prometheus, they would want to know what humanity was hiding. They would dig deeper, ask questions, maybe even try to break in. They had no idea what they would unleash. Security Chief Mingyu, she said. How long before they find us? At their current scanning rate? Maybe 12 hours. But if they detect the energy signatures from our equipment, it could be much sooner. The irony was bitter. Humanity's most advanced technology was based on dimensional manipulation. It was powerful beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. But it also created energy signatures that were impossible to hide from advanced sensors. The Vorthak were about to discover that humans possessed technology that violated every known law of physics. They would demand explanations. They would want to know how humanity had developed such capabilities, and humanity could never tell them the truth. Dr. Nari, Kwang-Su said quietly, there might be another option. If we could stabilize the dimensional anchors manually, we could evacuate most of the facility while maintaining containment. That would require someone to stay behind, she said. The radiation levels around the anchors would be lethal within hours. I know. Before Dr. Nari could respond, a new voice came over the communication system. It was Sung-Ho, calling from Captain Hyun-Ki's ship. Dr. Nari, this is Sung-Ho. I heard about the situation down there. Sung-Ho, you should be safely away from here. I was a Prometheus engineer for 15 years before I took the surface assignment. I know every system in that facility. I know how to manually stabilize the dimensional anchors. Dr. Nari's heart sank. She knew what he was offering. Sung-Ho, the radiation exposure would kill you. I understand. But if I don't do it, how many people die when those things break through? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone who worked on Project Prometheus knew the numbers. If the void entities broke into normal reality, they wouldn't stop with one planet. They would spread like a plague, consuming entire star systems until someone found a way to stop them. Papa, no, came Yoonji's voice over the channel. There has to be another way. There isn't, sweetheart, Sung-Ho said gently. This is something I have to do. Dr. Nari closed her eyes. In 300 years of guarding humanity's secret, thousands of people had died to keep the sealed gateway secure. Sung-Ho was just the latest in a long line of heroes who understood the price of protecting the galaxy. How long would the manual stabilization hold? She asked Kwang-Su. Long enough to evacuate the research data and most of the equipment. Maybe even long enough to set up automated systems to maintain the anchors remotely. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it might be enough. They could save the facility and keep the gateway sealed at least for a while. Sung-Ho, Dr. Nari said finally. If you're sure about this, I'm sure. My daughter will grow up in a safe galaxy. That's worth any price. As plans were made for the most dangerous mission in Project Prometheus history, Dr. Nari couldn't help but think about the terrible irony of their situation. Humanity had spent 3 centuries hiding at the galaxy's rim, pretending to be weak and harmless. The truth was that they were the galaxy's protectors, standing guard against horrors that other species couldn't imagine. And now, to keep protecting that secret, good people were going to die. Above them, the Vorthak continued their mining operations, completely unaware that they were digging toward humanity's greatest secret. In a few hours, Sung-Ho would make his journey into the depths of the facility, knowing he would never come out. The price of keeping the galaxy safe was getting higher every day. Sung-Ho put on the radiation suit knowing it would only buy him a few extra hours. The dimensional anchors that kept the sealed gateway stable were surrounded by energy fields that would cook human cells from the inside out. But those few hours might be enough to save the galaxy. Papa, Yoonji whispered, holding his hand through the thick gloves of the suit. I don't want you to go. I know, sweetheart. But someone has to do this, and I'm the only one who knows the systems well enough. Technician Kyung-hee looked up from her computer station, tears in her eyes. The data upload is 60% complete. If you can keep the anchors stable for another 4 hours, we can save 3 centuries of research. Sung-Ho nodded. The research data was important, but it wasn't why he was doing this. Every piece of information in Project Prometheus was designed to understand and contain the things that lived in the void between realities. If that knowledge was lost, humanity would be defenseless against future breaches. Medic Tae-young checked his radiation monitors one last time. The suit will protect you for maybe 3 hours. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. I understand. Sung-ho said. He looked around the control room at the people who had become his family over the years. Take care of each other, and take care of Yoonji. As Sung-ho descended into the deepest levels of Project Prometheus, the situation above ground was getting worse. The Vorthak Empire had decided that humans were hiding something valuable, and they wanted to know what it was. Supreme Commander Vexthul arrived with a battle fleet of 50 ships, the largest force the Vorthak had ever sent to the Galactic Rim. His flagship, the Iron Fist, was a massive dreadnought armed with enough weapons to crack a planet in half. Commander Zethmore, Vexthul growled over the communication channel, explain to me why a simple mining operation requires my personal attention. Sir, the humans are hiding advanced technology. My science teams have detected energy signatures that shouldn't exist. What kind of technology? Captain Grixtel joined the conversation from his science vessel. Sir, the human ship we encountered could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It violated every known law of physics. Vexthul's yellow eyes narrowed. You're telling me these weak rim dwellers have technology that our best scientists don't understand? Yes, sir. And there's more. Deep scans of the planet show massive energy sources beneath the surface, much larger than any simple mining operation would require. Meanwhile, on Earth, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was not going well for humanity. Ambassador Ji-hun sat at the defendants' table, facing questions from representatives of dozens of species. Councillor Thys of the Azari Federation leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber lights. Ambassador Ji-hun, the Vorthak Empire has presented serious allegations. They claim your species possesses technology that violates the Technology Restriction Accords. With respect, Councillor Thys, the Vorthak have presented no evidence, only wild claims about impossible physics. Representative Maldan of the Crystal Commune spoke up. What about the energy readings from your mining operations? The Vorthak scans show power sources that dwarf anything in our databases. Ji-hun maintained his calm expression, but inside he was panicking. The Galactic Council was asking exactly the questions humanity couldn't answer. Our mining operations use standard fusion reactors. Perhaps the Vorthak equipment is malfunctioning. Malfunctioning equipment doesn't explain dimensional phase shifts, Councillor Thys said sharply. The Vorthak recorded a human ship that could pass through solid matter. Deep beneath Kepler 442b, Sung-ho reached the dimensional anchor chamber. The room was filled with machinery that hurt to look at directly. Geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Energy fields that bent light into impossible colors. At the center of it all was the sealed gateway. It looked like a crack in reality itself. A thin line of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light and sound. Around it, the dimensional anchors hummed with barely contained power, holding back forces that could unravel the fabric of space-time. Sung-ho's radiation detector was already clicking rapidly. He had maybe 3 hours before the exposure killed him. He began working on the stabilization systems, his hands steady despite the terror growing in his chest. Every few minutes, vibrations from the Vorthak mining operations above would shake the chamber, and the sealed gateway would pulse with dark energy. Through his radio, he could hear Kyung-hee's voice. Data upload is 75% complete. The anchors are holding stable thanks to your adjustments. Good, Sung-ho replied, trying not to think about what the radiation was doing to his body. How's my daughter? She's being very brave. Medic Tae-young is taking good care of her. Above ground, the situation was spiraling out of control. Supreme Commander Vexthul had declared the entire star system under Vorthak military law. Any ship that approached would be destroyed without warning. Captain Hyun-ki watched the enemy fleet from the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, his jaw clenched with frustration. How many ships now? 57 vessels and counting, Navigator Bo-Ram reported. She was back on duty, but her eyes still had a distant look from her experience between dimensions. They've got us completely surrounded. Sir, Engineer Dong Hyun said quietly, I could activate the quantum tunneling drive. We could phase through their blockade. And then what? Hyun-ki asked. They'd follow us to every human world in the sector. We'd just be spreading the problem. The truth was that humanity had enough firepower hidden in their rim colonies to destroy the entire Vorthak fleet. Their dimensional weapons could erase ships from existence without leaving a trace, but using those weapons would reveal the truth about human capabilities, and that would bring the entire galaxy down on their heads. On Earth, President Jin A was facing the hardest decision of her life. General Wu Sung stood before her desk, his face grim with determination. "Madam President, we can't keep this secret much longer. The Vorthak are too close to discovering Project Prometheus. If we reveal our true capabilities, every species in the galaxy will see us as a threat." Director Hei Wan argued from her chair. "They'll unite against us. And if the void entities break through because we failed to protect the containment facility, it won't matter what the galaxy thinks of us," General Wu Sung shot back. President Jinne looked out the window at the Earth's blue sky. 300 years ago, her predecessors had made the decision to hide humanity's greatest discovery. Now she had to decide whether to maintain that secret or reveal the truth that could save or damn them all. "What are our options?" she asked. "We could reveal part of our technology," Director Haywan suggested. "Enough to make the Vorthak back off, but not enough to show them our full capabilities. Or we could tell them everything," General Wu Sung said. "The truth about the void entities, about why we really live at the rim. Make them understand what we're protecting them from." President Jinne was quiet for a long moment. Either choice could lead to disaster. But doing nothing would definitely lead to the discovery of Project Prometheus. Deep in the dimensional anchor chamber, Sung Ho's radiation detector was screaming now. His vision was starting to blur, and he could taste blood in his mouth. But the anchors were holding stable, and Kyung-hee reported that the data upload was 90% complete. "Just a little longer," he whispered to himself, adjusting another stabilization field. "Just hold on a little longer." Above him, the Vorthak mining equipment was getting closer to the facility. Soon they would break through into the upper levels of Project Prometheus. When that happened, nothing would stop them from discovering humanity's greatest secret. The price of keeping the galaxy safe was measured in lives like Sung Ho's. Good people who understood that some secrets were worth dying for. But as the radiation slowly killed him, Sung Ho couldn't help but wonder if the price was getting too high to pay. President Jin A made her decision at exactly 1447 Earth Standard Time. The message went out on all secure channels. Operation Blackout is authorized. Reveal limited capabilities only. Protect Prometheus at all costs. Captain Hyun-ki received the order while watching Vorthak ships position themselves for what looked like a full planetary assault. Supreme Commander Vexthul had lost patience with human stubbornness. He was going to take what he wanted by force. "All ships, this is Admiral Taiksu," came the voice over the communication channel. "Prepare for fleet decloak. We're done hiding." Around Kepler 442b, space began to shimmer. One by one, human ships materialized from dimensional space. Not the handful that the galaxy thought humanity possessed, but 50 vessels of impossible design. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Supreme Commander Vexthul stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Where did they come from? My sensors showed empty space." "Sir," Captain Grixtall reported from his science vessel, "these readings are impossible. The human ships are phasing in and out of normal spacetime." Admiral Taiksu's face appeared on all communication channels, his weathered features stern with authority. "Commander Vexthul, you have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces from this system." "This is your only warning." Vexthul laughed, though it sounded forced. 50 ships against my fleet of 200? You're outnumbered 4-1, human." "Numbers don't mean what you think they do," Taiksu replied calmly. The battle that followed would be talked about in military academies for centuries. It lasted exactly 17 minutes from first shot to total Vorthak surrender. When Vexthul ordered his fleet to attack, the Vorthak weapons passed harmlessly through the human ships. The humans were fighting from multiple dimensions at once, striking from angles that didn't exist in normal space. Weapons Officer Dong Jun aboard the flagship demonstrated humanity's reality anchor technology for the first time in 3 centuries. Vorthak vessels suddenly found themselves locked in a single dimension, unable to maneuver while human ships attacked from impossible directions. But the real disaster was happening beneath the planet's surface. Deep in Project Prometheus, the sealed gateway cracked completely. The dimensional anchors that Sung Ho had died to stabilize finally failed under the strain of the battle above. A thin line of absolute darkness began to widen, and through it came things that should not exist. The void entities were unlike anything in normal reality. They were beings of pure entropy, creatures that existed in the spaces between dimensions. To them, Ordered reality was a disease that needed to be cured. Dr. Nari watched in horror as the first entity squeezed through the crack. It looked like a shadow with too many angles, a darkness that hurt to perceive directly. Where it touched the walls of the facility, matter simply ceased to exist. All personnel evacuate immediately, she broadcast over the facility's communication system. The containment breach is expanding, but there was nowhere to run. The void entities didn't just kill, they erased. Vorthak miners on the surface began vanishing as the entities spread outward. Not vaporized or destroyed, but deleted from reality as if they had never existed. Physicist Kwang Su worked frantically at his station, trying to contain the breach. Dr. Nari, I can create a controlled dimensional implosion. It will reseal the gateway, but what? It will destroy everything within a light-year radius. The entire star system will have to be sacrificed. Dr. Nari closed her eyes. 3 centuries of research gone. Sung Ho's sacrifice made meaningless. But if the void entities escaped into the galaxy, they would consume everything. Do it, she said quietly. Above them, the space battle had ended with complete human victory, but Admiral Taixu realized that something was terribly wrong when his sensors detected reality distortion spreading from the planet's surface. Captain Hyun-ki, get your people out of there now. Something's happening to the planet. Through the view screen, they could see areas of space where the stars simply stopped existing. The void entities were spreading beyond the planet, reaching into space itself. Engineer Dong Hyun ran calculations on his console. Sir, if those things reach the trade routes, they could spread across the entire galaxy within months. President Jin Ai received the final transmission from Dr. Nari, just as the dimensional implosion began. Madam President, the Prometheus engine is activating. The breach will be sealed, but the cost? The communication cut off as the star system began to collapse in on itself. Not a normal stellar collapse, but a dimensional implosion that folded space-time like origami. The void entities were pulled back into the spaces between realities, and the gateway sealed itself with a violence that shook the fabric of the universe. When it was over, the Kepler 442 system was gone. Not destroyed, but erased from reality as if it had never existed. The human fleet floated in empty space, surrounded by confused Vorthak ships that couldn't understand what had just happened. On Earth, President Jin-A faced the emergency session of the Galactic Council with a heavy heart. The representatives of dozens of species sat in stunned silence as she revealed the truth that humanity had hidden for 3 centuries. 300 years ago, human scientists accidentally opened a doorway to the void between realities, she began. We discovered that our universe is just one layer in an infinite dimensional stack. Between each layer, live entities of pure destruction that view ordered reality as a disease. Counselor Theiss of the Azari Federation leaned forward. You're saying these void entities could destroy our entire galaxy? They could destroy every galaxy in this cluster, President Jin-A replied. Humanity has spent 3 centuries developing technology to guard against them. Our retreat to the galactic rim wasn't cowardice. It was a self-imposed quarantine. Representative Maldan of the Crystal Commune spoke up. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep this secret? Because panic would have made the situation worse. Wars, failed experiments, desperate attempts to find these entities and destroy them. All of it would have created more breaches. The only way to stay safe was to stay quiet. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some representatives demanded proof. Others called for humanity to be exiled completely. A few asked whether it was already too late. President Jin-A waited for the chaos to die down before continuing. The Kepler 442 incident will not be the last. As the galaxy expands and technology advances, there will be other breaches, other encounters with things that exist between dimensions. What are you proposing? Counselor Theiss asked. A joint defense force. Humanity will share our dimensional technology with selected species. Together, we can create an early warning system and response teams to deal with future breaches. The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Some species wanted nothing to do with humanity's cursed knowledge. Others demanded access to all human technology immediately. A few suggested that humanity should be destroyed as a precaution. In the end, fear won out over anger. The galaxy had seen what the void entities could do. They had watched an entire star system disappear from reality. Whatever the risks of working with humanity, they were smaller than the risk of facing the void alone. Captain Hyun-ki, promoted to admiral after the crisis, took command of the new Rim Defense Fleet. It was a joint force with ships and crews from dozens of species, all trained in the basics of dimensional theory and void entity containment. Engineer Dong Hyun led the technology sharing program, teaching selected alien scientists how to detect dimensional weaknesses and seal minor breaches before they became major problems. Navigator Boram, her mind permanently changed by her experience between dimensions, became humanity's first ambassador to the spaces between worlds. She could sense when the void entities were stirring, providing early warning of potential breaches. The galaxy was no longer ignorant of the threats that lurked in the dark between realities. But with knowledge came responsibility. Every species now understood that their continued existence depended on eternal vigilance. In the deep space stations that ringed the galaxy, human and alien crews worked together to monitor the barriers between dimensions. They knew that somewhere in the infinite darkness, ancient entities waited for another chance to break through. The price of safety was constant fear. The price of knowledge was the loss of innocence. But the price of ignorance would have been the death of everything they held dear. As Admiral Hyun-ki looked out at the stars from his command ship, he thought about Sung-ho and Dr. Nari and all the others who had died to keep the galaxy safe. Their sacrifice had bought time, nothing more. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity wasn't fighting alone. The galaxy had finally learned the truth about the darkness between the stars. And together, they would stand guard against the ancient hunger that waited in the void. The Rim was no longer humanity's prison. It was the galaxy's first line of defense against the things that existed in the spaces between worlds. And on that frontier, human ships patrolled alongside alien vessels, all of them knowing that they were all that stood between civilization and the ashes of reality itself.